the markets hard today. Now remember, our markets were closed yesterday, but across the globe, when we first got word of this, markets had been buffeted pretty much everywhere, and the concern that this is escalating. All of this at a time when defense-related shares were doing okay. Almost everything else was not doing okay. Flight to quality, everyone buying into bonds, interest rates getting very low, so gold moving up better than a one-year high. That's the kind of thing that happens when markets are getting very, very anxious. Bull Media founder Carrie Sheffield joins us, Fox Business Network's Charlie Gasparino, Democratic strategist Robin Barrow. All right, so Charlie, the fallout in the market seems to be pronounced here. Now, sometimes this can change on the day, and these sell-offs never really last very long. What's your sense of what our trade is telling you?
Well, I mean, it was a bad open because of what was going on in North Korea, but it was compounded by economic issues, and I think that's really what caused this market to go down. There's a growing sense among investors that we're not going to get tax cuts or regulatory reform anytime soon because there's going to be disaster relief in Texas, debt ceiling we have to deal with, and a few other things, keeping the, passing a budget. Those things are going to occupy Congress and the president, and you won't get the fiscal policy stimulus that he wanted, which was getting rid of some lousy regulations like Dodd-Frank and cutting taxes. And the reason why you know that is because some of the most pronounced declines in stocks today came from those stocks that would benefit from the corporate tax cut and getting rid of Dodd-Frank, namely Goldman Sachs and the financials. So that's what you have today. I think some of this was North Korea. A lot of it was the economic stuff that I just laid out.
Carrie, clearly the president is looking at options with North Korea beyond just the traditional ones of squeezing off North Korea economically. Is it your sense right now that that is going to be a dominant theme? And because the fear seems to be, however justified, it could delay some of this other stuff that the markets like to see, like tax cuts, like some of those reprieves that Charlie was outlining.
Well, yes, I think the fact that the UN was able to pass sanctions on Chinese banks and also just sanctions in general against the North Koreans with Chinese support, that's significant. So I would like to see stronger economic sanctions against North Korea. I think that's something that might settle the markets. I do have to, as usual, challenge, zoom out on that chart that you showed for today's trading and look at the past year since President Trump won, and it's always going up and up and up. It might go down a little bit, but the overall trajectory is going up. So I think there is a lot of positivity there. And, Charlie's right in terms of, and yes, as a millennial, I said Charlie's right, at least on this issue.
Don't embolden him. Don't embolden him there.
In terms of the domestic
Try to be polite
politics
here.
Well, Ron, let me ask you about that, because we know this meeting going on with this group of six is very instrumental in getting tax reform going. We do know as well the president's going to include in a separate meeting Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer on the belief that maybe he can get bipartisan support for these tax cuts whenever they happen. Obviously, the goal is this year, but what do you make of that?
I'm very hopeful because Nancy reached out back in March and tried to extend the olive branch, and now Republicans have extended the olive branch. Frankly, I'm kind of tired of them beating each other with olive branches. We need to see action. The Democrats have said that they're ready to step forward and start the talks, and the White House was receptive to that earlier last month. So I really hope that we can come together.
Robin, are you where she has said that, and I believe Chuck Schumer the same, if any of it includes relief for the very rich, they don't want any part of it. Are you in that camp?
I do see their point, but like I already reviewed his policy extensively. There are cuts for the middle-class Americans. They'll get about $1,500 a year. I recognize that that's a much smaller percentage than the top 1% and corporations, but it is there.
Well, we don't know what the final package will be.
Let's talk real politics here, Neil. If President Trump thinks he's going to cut a deal with the Democrats and get it through a Republican Congress that raises taxes, it ain't happening. It's just not going to happen. And it's
what would be the raising of taxes? You're buying the Gary Cohn line that you limit the increase of the upper income, you take away a lot of their write-offs. It would have a net effect of increasing their taxes.
Here's where I think it gets problematic for President Trump. If the corporate tax cut is something marginal, like 25% instead of 20%, that's really not too much of a cut, given that it's at 27% when you take out deductions right now. So say you take it down to 25 and get rid of all the deductions, guess what? That's not much of a cut. Or if you go on the personal personal
it's a
side.
35% now. That's a statutory.
But remember, that's
level,
a statutory level. But
you say for it to be serious, it's got to be 20.
Because you would plug their plan is to plug the loopholes, and and basically if you plug the loopholes and only take it down to 25%, you're not getting much of a cut. And the other thing is on the personal side, let's just see this happening. Republicans like Paul Ryan, like Mitch McConnell, selling a tax increase to the American people. We should also point out that if your goal is to spur,
if your goal is to spur,
let me just make this point. If your goal is to spur the economy, and you raise taxes on people who pay 50% of all taxes, namely the top 5%, you're not going to spur the economy.
What are your final thoughts on that?
Speaker Ryan does not want to raise taxes. He wants to cut them. And yes, there is a big difference between the statutory rate and the effective rate. And we need to get rid of this whack-a-mole. We need to make it cleaner, simpler, so that people who don't have... Exactly, so that people who have fancy lawyers and accountants can't,
Thank you very much. Jumping on stuff, just want to...